We're continuing with our Gauteng water supply discussion in light of the recent water supply issues around the province. A bulk supplier, Rand Water, has also embarked on extensive maintenance work. I'm now joined in studio by Gugulethu Quma, Operations Manager at Johannesburg Water, as well as Professor Anja Du Plessis, water expert from UNISA. A very good afternoon and thank you so much to you both. Mr. Quma, perhaps let me start with you and just get an update in as far as the Rand Water extensive maintenance project that it has now embarked on. How has that, if at all, affected your operations? I mean, are residents receiving water? Are you handling the situation at the moment?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to you and the viewers. Yes, the first phase of the maintenance program has resumed very well. The hillside pump station has been completed, as well as WAT copies, which give us a relief in the CBD side as well as the Johannesburg Water South. Johannesburg South. But the side of Roodepoort towards Randburg, we are now on that program for Ekenhof, which is currently in force. Most of the systems and the reservoirs and towers in Randburg area as well as Roodepoort, they're currently empty, and we are providing alternate water through the stationary tanks as well as the roaming tanks that are filling those stationary tanks, and also giving relief to the customers, as well as a particular area called Commando, like your Steel, Crosby as well, is also supplied from that system, which is heavily impacted, and there's wide area water outages in those areas, and we also have some alternate water that is deployed in those areas.
All right, we'll get to speak about how you also maintain your own systems in a moment, but I want us to discuss, the systemic issues, which is probably why we're here, and looking at the lay of the land in as far as the water crisis in this country. Prof, perhaps let's start with you in terms of just looking at the systemic issues that we are hearing. I mean, whilst some water experts are not quite comfortable in saying that we will be seeing a water grid collapse anytime soon, there are, of course, some systemic issues that we are seeing, particularly in municipalities and, of course, water entities like Johannesburg Water. Yeah. I mean, what for you, jumps up in as far as what we are currently seeing? I mean, we're hearing of, lack of infrastructure, including the lack of maintenance, increase in demand, of course, due to the population that's probably also exacerbating this problem, but also poor financial controls in the municipality level as well as some entity levels. Just your thoughts.
Well, that's a mouthful, of course. What we need to be cognizant of is that our water issues aren't simple. It is a complex issue. There isn't one cause and effect. As Joburg Water will also say to you, they are also having challenges. I would say that some of the major challenges that we are facing is non-revenue water, where most of the consumers, they only think that non-revenue water, when they think of that, they would see a bursted pipe or a leaking area. But it's more than that. It's theft, as well as Joburg Water not receiving payment from communities as well. And if you don't receive your revenue at the end of the day, you won't be able to address some of the systematic issues, like whether you've got human resource capabilities that you're struggling with, whether it's vandalism, whether it's theft, all of those things that we need to be cognizant of. The other thing we also need to think about is that we, as a consumer, also need to change our attitudes. If we can think about what we did during the drought of 2015 to 2018, I heard a lot of people saying, but I pay for water, so I'm going to use as much as I want. And now with us going into this maintenance stage with Rand Water, and then also Lesotho Highlands scheme from October to March up to next year, we need to change our behaviors towards water as well. And that is the primary issues. I won't say that we are close to a complete collapse. All taps are going to be empty. I don't think that is fair. You have to look at the whole system as a complete system. It's a complex system, and we obviously have to prioritize the areas that need attention, and infrastructure is one of them.
And so I want to unpack, what the Prof is saying, but I want us to discuss things that are within your control. Of course, there is a lot to unpack in terms of, the theft elements that come into play, residents not paying for their water when they should. But some of the things that are in your control is the maintenance of your system. What we are seeing with the lack of maintenance is that it does compromise the infrastructure. So just talk to us about what are the constraints in as far as Johannesburg Water is concerned.
Thank you. If you look at that picture, now the infrastructure we're talking about is quite aged, and the funding model that supports the level of upgrade and maintain and renewal, including the new infrastructure, is not at the rate that it should align.
Yeah.
At this stage is more or less half the rate that is required, looking at the funding model and the next financial years that will come. So generally the everyday maintenance will be deployed, but you will start to see now the infrastructure, there's a lot of pest, there's a lot of demand on the existing resources to deal with the everyday type of challenges. But now we also need to look at the renewal and the upgrading the system, and also the new type of infrastructure that needs to be onboarded or brought to the system, so that we can deal with the population growth and also the general the increase as far as the demand is concerned. So maintenance on day-to-day type of operation, that can be covered by the resources. But if you're looking at upgrading the infrastructure so that it can be able to deal with the challenges of the day, then you need to look at your capital budget that funds.
And just talking about that capital budget, can you speak to the 2023-2024 report where your business plan actually revealed a 24 billion rand infrastructure backlog? I mean, where does that then feed into your day-to-day, as you say, and also from a long-term planning?
You will see now it's 24 billion this year. And generally, the entity, which is Johannesburg Water, requires 2 billion rand because the infrastructure base is currently sitting at 115 billion. And if you're looking at the norms and standard, 2% of that amount is what you require, which works out to around 2 billion rand. But if you're looking at the rate of funding, it's less than 1 billion rand. So every year, you're actually accumulating. Next year, we'll be talking about a different figure. Right now, the entity requires at least an estimate of 3 billion rands per financial year, but it's currently operating at a rate of 1 billion rand or even less in a financial year. Now, the remaining useful life of the infrastructure has now dropped because now the infrastructure that we have has actually aged. Yes, there are rehabilitation programs that are there, but the rate that we are doing the pipeline replacement, the rehabilitation of the reservoirs is not at the rate that you would require to maintain such kind of infrastructure.
And Prof, I mean, when you listen to that explanation, but also look at how it translates on the ground, I mean, what are your takeaways from that, particularly because of some of the things that you mentioned earlier on in terms of non-revenue service? When we speak about the theft element or the lack of budget, for instance, there's also that problem, of course, of poor financial controls, not only at municipal level, but also at some of the water entities.
Yeah, and that's completely true. I would like to say to my Joburg Water colleague, we are not doing enough. The municipalities need to reprioritize. We have a major water infrastructure backlog. As he said, like 24 billion rand, that is just going to get more. The longer you wait, the more expensive infrastructure is going to be replaced. And that is what we're sitting with now at this point in time. Not enough money is being given to Joburg Water, or whether it now be Rand Water, any water entity. But the other issue that you speak about is the misappropriation of funds. We've seen many examples of this, not just within Gauteng, but across the country. And what we are seeing now and what we are calling for is for the ring fencing of these finances and money, so that at the end of the day, that you have your private investors as well as your private sector that feel a little bit more trust when you say, listen, the funds are going to be ring fenced. It will only be used for this. And then most companies feel more comfortable in terms of working on the infrastructure then.
And of course, another worrying factor is the demand, for water. Yep. We know that because of growth in population, etc., and other reasons behind that, and perhaps you can also just, speak to those reasons. Yep. What concerns do you have there particularly when you see that some areas simply just don't have the water that they need and they're paying for?
Yeah, so water demand is high in South Africa generally. Western Cape is doing a little bit better, but we need to remember that when they calculate water demand, they also include your non-revenue water. So there are different opinions about this. Some say that, yeah, but Joburg consumers use a lot less than what is estimated. I think it's over 240 litres per day that is estimated that consumers use. But when you now deduct all of your non-revenue water, which is your physical leaks, theft, vandalism, etc., it goes down to 120. But I would say that we need to focus generally on our behaviors and attitudes towards water. We don't pay as much as other international countries do, and I think we've become too comfortable, and this is what we are now seeing when we are doing the Rand Water maintenance. So Rand Water hasn't completely stopped the water flow. They have reduced water flow, but what we are seeing is that our reservoirs are struggling because people are just using water like it's every day. So I would share the frustrations of some people to say that, why am I not getting water out of my tap despite me paying? However, we need to remember that it's a community effort. It's not just you as one.
And just on that note, you know, just in terms of services delivered but not being paid for, how is that impacting Johannesburg Water?
Definitely, because there's cost associated to the value chain. Joburg Water will have to procure on the long-term agreement from Rand Water and, of course, distribute that water to the consumers. But at the end of the day, there's more consumers perhaps that are not paying for the services, but the demand continues to increase. In particular, if you're looking at that non-revenue water that we're talking about, sitting at the total figure of 46%. But the one that we need to worry about is the physical losses, because it's categorized into three. You've got your physical loss, you've got your commercial loss, and you've got unbilled but authorized. Like you've got your informal settlement and new areas that keep on expanding throughout the city, so you need to distribute water to those areas. So you cannot bill for those areas. But you also have the one that we should be worried about is the one that is physical losses, where your reservoir need rehabilitation. Is that funding we were talking about? When the pipeline is telling you that in this particular area, it keep on bursting, it telling you that it has aged or the remaining useful life is no longer, or actually is operating beyond its useful life. So now,
I mean, we're looking at challenges now, of course, but in our next segment, we will look at, you know, solutions, because I think at this point in time, people want to see action and they want to see solutions. But because we are going to be letting go of Professor Du Plessis, and Prof, perhaps let's, you know, wrap up this conversation with you. And now, one of the critical things, and this is probably going to be an unfair question to you, but as we are about to speak on, you know, solutions, one of the critical things that's absolutely happening in our country now is, of course, the change of guard, moving from the 6th administration to the 7th administration. How does that impact on, you know, the workings of entities like Rand Water, Johannesburg Water, municipalities? When you have, for instance, a minister of water and sanitation who's now potentially going to be leaving, and he's created, you know, this precedent now where a lot of praise is coming from certain quarters that he's done this good work, but he is potentially not going to be returning onto the 7th administration. How does that influence the work that is being done on the ground?
Well, currently I think things are going forward as they should as we await the new cabinet. I really do hope, and I make a call to the powers that be, that we do keep Minister Senzo there. He has done such great work. I mean, we were in the dark ages from 2010 up to recently. He's revamped most of the things. He has done the green drop, the blue drop, the no drop, all of the things that us as experts, as well as private and public and civil society, have been calling for. He has now changed the direction of the ship. I would just ask that he keeps the captaincy so that we can now move forward. There are a lot of initiatives that he's raised, the DG has raised. They're all doing a very good job. So I would hope for continuity so that we don't go back to where we were in a position where they merged water with human settlements. The portfolio was just too big. So if we want to solve South Africa's water issues, we need to keep it focused, and we need to transfer our actions into words, but also the other way around.
Absolutely. Prof, thank you so much for your time.